And yeah, so again, look, welcome to our webinar on co-location versus true cloud. I'm Daniel Fleetwood, the Business Development Manager here at Evolution Systems, and we're also joined by Jeff Borland, the Managing Director.
Hey guys, how's everyone going? Great to have you here. We've only got 15 minutes to get through a lot of content, so let's just jump straight into it.
Thank you, Jeff. So look, in the intro, as we know, co-location has been a great option for many customers and companies over the years that don't have their own data center or in-house skills to look after their own hardware, and that's been a great option for them. However, there are limitations and things to consider when it comes to co-location, especially when compared to cloud. So over the past 12 to 18 months, Evolution have been very vocal on this topic, releasing ebooks and videos. So on this topic exactly. So this webinar, we're going to discuss a little bit further the 6 key factors that we believe and what we've seen customers should consider when faced with this type of decision for their applications.
It's probably worth pointing out, Dan, at this point as well, actually, that co-location can take on 2 forms. The original co-location was where a company would move their infrastructure into a third-party data center. Whereas recently we've seen an increase in business providers buying infrastructure and subscribing that to customers. We're seeing that a lot, especially in the IBMI space.
That's exactly right. So with the first point to consider, co-location and private cloud are very different, as you said, Jeff. So yeah, the first thing is that it's not always clear, or customers are not always made aware of the differences in co-location and that they're very different to cloud. So when moving to co-location, some risks are mitigated, like not having to worry about power and cooling and the security of the premises. However, with this type of co-location, the customer still owns the hardware and therefore is responsible for managing, things like updates. So yeah, exactly. So Jeff, any more comments on that point before I move on?
I think one of the other advantages for co-location that people can go down that path is potentially bandwidth issues that they might be having locally. Infrastructure still needs to be sized correctly so that it can meet the needs of your business over the time period, because you don't want to be upgrading or migrating infrastructure on a less than a 2 to 3 year or 3 to 5 year scale.
Exactly right. And just on that point, with cloud, the customer can focus purely on their application, their virtual assets, networking and security. They're all taken care of by the cloud supplier. So that they can just focus purely on the business and the business applications. Moving forward to the next point, renewals and maintenance can become inconvenient. So with co-location, as we've said, this typically means the client retaining ownership of the hardware, and that means ensuring contracts, including maintenance, are up to date. Essentially, the customer still has to manage the hardware and software and the vendors for that, so IBM or whoever it might be, Nutanix. Whereas with the cloud, or when you move your applications to the cloud, the customer, they don't have to worry about maintaining or updating contracts for the hardware. All this is managed by the cloud provider, and a good cloud provider will also have SLAs in place for if something did go wrong or support was required.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the other thing to remember here is that if you are adopting the more modern approach where your business partner has multiple boxes or multiple servers, they've got to remember to maintain all of those. We've seen instances in the past, and where hardware or software maintenance has expired, and it's not a great experience for anyone involved. We mandate at Evolution that all cloud infrastructure is covered by vendor maintenance and not third party. And that's another thing to look out for is the third party maintenance.
Exactly right. Third party maintenance doesn't really entitle you to firmware updates, so that can put you in a bit of a security breach there, or an issue with the firmware not being up to date. So yeah, that's a great point. Moving on to option number 3. So this is a really big one for me. Lack of flexibility and scalability and future proofing. So for me, with co-location, capacity management really stays with the customer's under the customer's responsibility, and they therefore have to size the hardware, CPU, storage, really with the next 3 to 5 years in mind. So you end up having to pay for more resources that you may not need in the short term. And then if you do need to expand, and if your business is growing, then additional costs to install new hardware and do upgrades and possibly migrate will apply. So with cloud, you only pay for what you need at the time. As customers grow, the provider can add resources almost immediately with no extra installation costs or downtime. So you no longer have to worry about if hardware or software is end of life, because upgrades can be performed in the background, and all part of the cloud subscription.
Yeah, end of life is a big one. How often do we see components going out of reaching end of life? That's a real problem at times. The other thing to consider as well is that if you are scaling, you're dependent then on delivery and implementation times for new infrastructure. If you need to expand your storage array, for example, that can take up to 4 to 6 weeks with that co-location environment.
Exactly. Whereas with the cloud provider, it should be able to be done within 4 to 6 minutes. Okay, moving on to the next consideration. Reliability and uptime are critical. Obviously, that goes without saying. So with co-location, it really still is the customer's responsibility to manage alerts generated. It could be overnight, and making sure the uptime is there to ensure hardware is upgraded and patched. Whereas the cloud provider monitors the solution 24/7, responds to any alerts and outages in accordance with the SLA, and as I say, upgrades and patching can be done in the background.
Yeah, the good thing to point out here is whether you have team members that can actually respond to infrastructure issues 24/7. A good provider would also have the best-in-class monitoring applications. And one point we haven't discussed yet is redundancy. We see the cost of downtime can be quite significant. I mean, as Gartner points out there, $5,600 for each minute of downtime. That can equate to over $8 million per day. Now, obviously, that's at the large end of town, but having N+1 redundancy across all critical components can really eliminate or drastically reduce the cost of downtime. So it really is down to individuals' budgets, whether in a co-location environment, does your budget stretch to actually expand to that N+1 infrastructure setup?
Yeah, exactly right. Our next consideration number 5, is there is a growing demand for physical space. So look, as we've seen all over the world, data centers are going up everywhere. So the demand for physical space is increasing and continues to do so. So customers need to consider if the DC that they have, their equipment co-located to, has enough space for them to grow. Customers need to maintain a technology roadmap and ensure that they don't outgrow the DC. So with cloud providers, obviously, they take care of that technology roadmap and physical space. Customers can therefore just maintain focus on growing the business, and while the cloud provider really deals with any data center issues that may arise.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, we've done data center relocations, and they take a lot of planning, and they're not without risk. So if your data center can't accommodate you, then that could be an issue that can potentially take months to resolve. And that's not even taking into account the legal and financial ramifications.
Yes, exactly right. Awesome. Point number 6, our final point. You are responsible for compliance and security. So look, another big one, in my opinion. Co-location customers' servers are hosted in physical racks, so security is taken care of. However, the customer still has to manage firmware patching to ensure they're up to date and compliant from a server and OS security point of view. Whereas a good cloud provider will manage all the updates to ensure your environment is secure, both physically, and will liaise with the customer from an operating system point of view to manage those updates, those critical updates to operating systems.
Yeah, and Dan, you mentioned earlier on that you may not even be entitled to firmware updates if your provider is not using vendor maintenance, which obviously would be outside of your control if you're adopting the newer version of co-location, if that's the right way to put it. And there are also best practices around hardening the servers to minimize the risks of compromise. So providers must be diligent, focused, and constantly aware of threats, so that they can maximize the amount of protection that they're giving your environment.
Yeah, exactly right. So with those 6 points, I hope that we've made it a little bit clearer on the differences between co-location and cloud. and to know whether or not which one is right for your business. We're almost right on the money, so we've got a couple of minutes left for any questions. So let me just go.
Before we jump into that, Dan, sorry, I just want to add, we've got customers that have utilized co-location within our DCs, and it's actually worked out very well for them. On the other side, we've got customers that have scaled rapidly, and a co-location environment wouldn't have been appropriate for them. So it's not a question about what is right or wrong. It's more about what's right for your individual business and your individual business needs, and it's important to get that right.
That's exactly right, and that's where we come in. We can look at what your business needs and what is right for your application, whether that be co-location or whether that be cloud. That's where you can come to us and reach out for any assistance. So right now, I've just checked the questions. We have got no questions at the moment. Last few seconds to see if anyone has any last minute questions before we bring this to a close. Fair enough. All right, look, let's bring this webinar to a close. I'd like to thank everybody.
Hang on. Has someone got his hand in the air?
I don't know. Who's got a hand in the air? Oh, okay, hold on, yes. All right, there's some. I believe you're unmuted.
That's me unmuted. It's Sandeep's got a question. You've got to use the Q&A function, Sandeep.
Oh.
Okay, trying to unmute, but it's not letting me.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yep, loud and clear.
How are you?
Hey, how are you? So, I was just trying to raise the hand, so I'm glad someone saw me, which is great. So, one of the key questions is, by the way, thanks for shedding some light on, different situations that clients have gone through. Have there been situations where clients have actually migrated their entire infrastructure in a co-located environment? The process and the length and the time frames and the skills required, how complex can it get, assuming they are all on, I don't know, IBM or obviously power infrastructure? And if they've already taken the gamble and they've gone to a co-located environment, what sort of, what are they looking at? It's a different story when they have not taken that decision, but if they've already done that, how easy is it to migrate them back into the cloud environment?
So it's an interesting question there, because if they decide to co-locate that, there's a lot of moving parts. So it kind of would have to be done in one kind of big bang over a weekend, where you lift and shift the kit into a co-located. If there is any issues, then you'd really have to probably move it back. Whereas with the cloud, you can actually leave the existing hardware where it is, take snapshots, and migrate those into the cloud, test it, and if it all works, off you go. And if there's an issue for whatever reason, you can then just go right back to the existing hardware. So there's a lot less risk involved when migrating from on-prem into the cloud. Whereas if you want to lift and drop the co-location, like I say, there's a lot of moving parts there for issues to arise.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you think about all the cables that have to be labeled and put back exactly where they should be, putting Humpty back together again at the other side. And yeah, the fallback strategy, so there's a networking issue or anything like that, it's moving it right back to where it was. So that can cause increased downtime as well, because there could be a very unforeseen issue at the very end of the migration or the relocation.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions out there, guys?
We are way over time, so
Are you going to post this on LinkedIn Live at some stage?
we've taken a recording, so yeah, we'll take a look, and then we'll it will definitely be available on our Learning Hub, and then yeah, we'll decide if to use LinkedIn Live or do another session for sure.
Okay, fantastic, thank you.
Well, guys, we hope you found this informative, and look out for our next one.
Thanks everyone, and look,
Thank
if you require any further information or need any cloud-related issues, reach out via LinkedIn or our website and fill out the Contact Us form, and I'll be happy to give you a call. So thanks for attending, and have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Dan.